Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Leighanne Oh. I'm part of the DukeNY Career Conversations team and also on the DukeNY board. Today is our week 29. We are really lucky to have Lili the Vice President of Events, Marketing, and Special Projects at Hearst Lab. Hi, Lili. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I wish I was 29 years old, but it's the 29th one, so we'll have some fun.
29 in spirit. You're always young and vibrant. So
young at heart.
So, you've had such a colorful career. Let's just start from the beginning. So you were pre-med at Duke, and you mentioned that you had the next 10, 20 years planned out when you first went. But then you took Orgo, the infamous Orgo, and you realized that you wanted to work with people and do something different. You've been in PR, events, and marketing roles since, and have had so many different roles at different companies. You shot a Today Show segment in Russia, to planning the public library celebrating their centennial. You worked on the New York City Grammy Awards, and then even the Peanuts and Snoopy franchise. That's just a mouthful. Like, could you just walk us through your career at a high level, and what does it mean to be in PR versus marketing and events, and how have these experiences interrelated for you?
Well, I have had a very non-traditional career path after I decided not to pursue the medical path. And some of my professors at Duke were really instrumental. They were my mentors. I mean, two of them were invited to my wedding. So I was really, really close to these professors. One was Manny Eisenberg, who I still keep in touch with. He taught a theater class. The other was Bruce Payne, who also a leadership program, and got me my first internship after college in LA with AFI, the American Film Institute. And I loved media, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I spent the first decade of my career in the nonprofit world. And as you mentioned, did a live remote from Red Square in Russia. And I had zero PR experience. I mean, it was just one of these wonderful opportunities. I worked for an orchestra called the American Soviet Youth Orchestra. And when you worked in small organizations that were nonprofits, you tended to wear multiple hats. So for the first decade of my life, I really did a little bit of development, a little bit of PR, a lot of PR, but also marketing, promotions, and sort of one job led into another. So a lot of my friends from college back in the day either went to business school or accepted a job and were there for years, and that's where they were going to be. And I'm more like the young people today who got a job, and then I got a new job because that job ended because the tour ended, and I ended up having three mentors who I worked for 10 years because they would move on. And so my whole life at the orchestra, at 13 WNET, and the New York Public Library were all with the same leadership. So
I mean, that's amazing.
And my first corporate job was working for Peanuts, Charlie Brown and Snoopy. So that was sort of a fun corporate job.
I know there's so much that we want to dig into based on what you said, but something that I've been really interested in learning about your narrative is this love-hate relationship you have with publicity. I think you've mentioned that before. For me, it seems like publicity PR is such a difficult job because there's a negative crisis management portion to the job. How did you overcome this portion of your job? I know that you've said that it's not your favorite part. So how did you deal with that?
Well, every job's going to have the parts that you love and the parts that you quite as much. And I loved consumer PR. I thought it was super fun. You're telling a story. When I first job at Hearst magazines, in my chapter 1 at Hearst, I was head of PR for the magazine division. And I sent an email to every producer ever I knew. And I was like, I'm basically 100 dial-in expert, because with all of my brands, I had someone I could tap who was a great resource and an expert on a topic. The negative part of, and the crisis management, some people thrive in that. They love that. But you have to do it. It's part of the job when you get there. But I much preferred the consumer-facing publicity.
Got it. And, again, I think you just said it lightly, but I want to make sure everybody else heard it on this call. But with your colorful career and when you joined Hearst as head of PR for the magazine division, you coined yourself as 1-800 Resource Center. What does this mean? And like, not to mention everything you've done on and off camera with all these big brands, including Cosmo and launching the Oprah magazine. What would you tell someone young in their career who wants to have a similar career like you? How did you create a career with such translatable skills? And not everybody gets to call themselves 1-800 Resource Center.
Well, I think you have to be passionate about your industry and what you're working in. I love magazines. I love media. And so every month I would get new content. I was always charged with whether it was Good Housekeeping Research Institute talking about pirate booty, or a cover break for Harper's Bazaar. There were always these great gems, again, that I could tell a story. There were also wonderful partnerships that we could form with specific broadcast outlets on a monthly basis for certain brands. And I think the key is skills, communication skills. You've got to watch what people are doing. When I was doing PR, we had lots of events and I do the PR for the events, but I'm watching the event going on. Somebody else might be managing that piece of the puzzle, but I need to know exactly what that event manager's doing, and not the weeds at that point, but I learned the weeds, had to raise my hand and really get involved in the steps and the processes for everything. And when I came back to her in this role, it was really interesting because one of the last projects I worked on with my PR hat on was launching the Oprah magazine in South Africa. And I worked directly with the president of Hearst Magazines International and our partners at the time. And they said, this is more or less a marketing plan. My old boss called and said, come back. We've got a new role for you. We're opening Hearst Tower. It's going to be events, marketing, special projects. I don't really know what it's going to be, but we'll figure it out when you get here. And that's what we did. And that was 15 years ago. So it's been and wonderful. I feel very fortunate.
It almost is like, what would you have done if you weren't in PR, if you weren't in media? Because it seems like your life was all around that. Like, do you feel like you could have been in any other career?
That's a great question. I think that I get my fuel from people and telling stories. So I think journalism could have been the other side. I could have done the other side of that. But I need to be around people.
So like, we've really talked about all the highs of your career, but it seems like you did have a small bump during our conversation when we spoke before. I mean, it's like 15 years ago, you left Hearst where you were loved and you did an excellent job, but you took a new role at Rolex where they offered you a 50% increase in your pay. But after about a year on the job, they eliminated your position. What happened there? And now looking back, how do you think about this time?
You know what? There's the old saying, everything happens for the best. I think you have to make the best of everything that happens. I think that throughout my career, as I mentioned before, I was doing PR, publicity, and then I was doing marketing, and then I was doing promotions, because sometimes the world of PR and some of the crisis management parts that I didn't love as much would weigh me down. And I think that I needed to leave and come back in this different role at Hearst. And it was a really wonderful learning experience for me. I had always been taking another job or getting a promotion or something and climbing the proverbial. And then it came to a point where I was like, okay, this is about me. This is about what I want to do and what's going to make me happy in my career versus opportunities coming to me. I got to seek them out. And that was a very different experience for me.
Yeah. And so let's go to where you are now. Like, what is your role at Hearst Labs? Like, and how do you translate your contacts and connections to the generation of women entrepreneurs there?
When I first posted something on LinkedIn that I joined Hearst Lab, they thought that I had left my old job. This is on top of my old job. So I'm a Hearst Lab scout, and there are many of us at Hearst. Hearst Lab I also have to mention a Duke connection. Someone had attended the Duke Women's Forum, a good friend of mine. She said, "Oh my gosh, you need to meet my friend at Hearst who works there." And so I had the great pleasure of meeting Lisa Burton, who's a vice president of Hearst Lab, who was a graduate. And the mission of the lab is really to close the gap in venture capital funding for women by helping the founders build healthy, sustainable, and highly scalable businesses. Right now, as many of you know, only 3% of VC dollars go to women-led startups. Unlike traditional incubators, the Hearst Lab is like a greenhouse. So it's not a cookie cutter. It's really, the goal is for the companies to stay strong and thrive outside of this Hearst greenhouse. And it's a very, very founder-friendly program, highly customizable. So it's an investment in, but it's also support for these early stage startups. They can tap legal resources, they get advice on the technical side. We've invested in about 30 companies so far.
Wow.
And it's really sort of high growth tech and tech enabled startups. And I am not a techie, but I love meeting the founders. And it has been a value added experience for me. And two companies with as a Scout sponsor. One is AppDeco, which is, everybody has to log on to AppDeco. It's awesome. It's basically for furniture. And it's, they wanted a connection to some New York real estate folks. So I tried to make connections for them. And right now I'm working with a group called Hello Ralphie, which is like telemed for pet parents. I am the proud parent of a 65-pound mutt named Duke, of course. And so I might not know about telemedicine for pets. I haven't used it, but it's really great for me to partner with them and try to find contacts for them, and also give them advice as a parent on, as a pet parent, on what I'd be looking for.
Oh, that's amazing. And again, you've had such an amazing tenure in PR and marketing and special events, and it seems like you've had a lot of pivots throughout. So what's next for you? What are you looking forward to, like in your job, in your career still?
I love my job. I'm very, very fortunate. I am constantly challenged. There's always something new. That my role has evolved greatly from when I started in this particular role 15 years ago. The bar, of course, is very high for anything that I put on, because I deal primarily with the C-suite folks. And if I'm putting on an event for editors or publishers of the magazine division, they're sitting in the front row of fashion shows. They are eating at every great restaurant when we had back in the day. So how do I create a wow moment? So for me, it's creativity and having what I call that sparkle dust moment. You know, you want something that people are going to walk away from and say, wow. And it's constantly learning. I mean, the past year has been a huge learning curve for all of us as we've pivoted to virtual events. And I think that virtual events and hybrid events are going to be part of our future. I used to do a series called the Masterclass Sessions in the tower at Hearst Tower for employees, and we used to bring in great speakers and have one-on-one conversations for employees to come and watch. And we pivoted very quickly, and we do Zoom conversations with people much more interesting than me tonight. But we put on these great conversations for employees with Brian Stevenson, and just last week or 2 weeks ago, we had Sharon Stone, and this week that we have Michelle Williams. She just came out with her new book for Mental Health Month on her own struggle with depression. So it's been wonderful because these programs are now accessible to Hearst employees across the country. So rather than just meeting the tower people, it goes out to like 14,000 people. So it's really been a silver lining for me. And those of you on this call, I see some friends, thank you for tuning in. They know I'm a very sort of optimistic, positive person. So I try to look for the bright side.
No, this marks right in the halfway point. And you mentioned your friends, but we ask everybody to turn on your videos to make this a more engaging conversation. And we'll go through Q&A. Please send in your questions. We had a bunch come through email, and I see a couple through the chat function as well. First one is actually from Ted Fleming, who was our speaker our last one. And so he's asking, based on your work at Hearst Lab, what are the biggest barriers women entrepreneurs face that we can address in the near term?
That's a really good question. I think we just need to support. I think in the near term, it's as simple as just being out there, and they need the word of mouth. They need to know that there are places like Hearst Lab to apply and to get that help that they need in these early stages.
Next question. What are the top 3 pieces of professional career advice you would give to people on this call? It seems like you really how do you even summarize and give top 3 bullets to people who want to do exactly what you did?
3 bullets. One is do your best. Like always just put in 110%. And if it's to your liking, don't hand something in that you don't think is excellent. You have to be that guide. Another is like, you don't put off your life and your destiny on hold for your job. I mean, I learned that when I left Rolex as I was climbing the ladder. I had gotten promotions or different jobs, and I had put starting a family on hold. And I said, you know what? This is my life. I want to start a family. I now have a 11th grader and a 9th grader. So don't put your own life on hold. And then my top bit of advice is there are different jobs that are right at different times in your life. When I was in my 20s, I could travel with this crazy orchestra and go all over Russia and Europe, and I could be away for 3 months. I now have 2 kids at home, and in my job now in events, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I can say to my family, I'm going to be out this week. I've got a executive retreat in Texas, or I've got the Harper's Bazaar Icons event at the Plaza Hotel. I'll see you at 2:00 in the morning, So I can plan and schedule my life a little better. So I do think that there are different jobs that are right for you at different times in your life.
Great. And I think the next question we got is about translatable skills, but kind of tying it to what Ted actually told us last week about what are the 3 things people need to know you for, and you have to hone that in. It seems like obviously you're the connector, but what other translatable skills do you feel like you personally worked on to develop throughout your career?
Organizational skills, communication skills. I mean, it all to that, and your relationships. I mean, my relationships have been so important to me, as you can see that I invited professors to my wedding. But I think that it is about making the effort. The more you put into anything you do, the more you get out of it.
Is there though, I feel like communication is something that we always work on to get better. Is there something that you did in particular to really hone in that skill?
I answered telephone calls back in the day when people made calls. I would answer every single telephone call. And same thing with emails. Even if a solicitor is saying, my platform for X, Y, and Z, or somebody, I get a spam email, I will answer it and say, I'm sorry, I'm not your right contact, but thank you for reaching out. I just think following up and being present and actually communicating with people by phone and any kind of correspondence.
Wow, that's a good reminder for myself. Now I feel like there's a list of people I need to reach out to in my inbox. So,
and also pick up the phone. I think sometimes it's just you can send emails, but the old fashioned pick up the phone and say hi. I know it sounds very antiquated. And then you can follow up with the paper trail of the email. But sometimes you get so much more accomplished and you don't have the tone and you're not reading in between the lines of a very formal email chain. You know, I still pick.
Great. A question from Dana. So I'm sure you are excited to get back to in-person events, but do you think that any of the amazing virtual events that you created will have a place going forward in your calendar for Hearst? Will people travel less going forward or gather virtually into the future?
It's going to be a combination, Dana. There are going to be some hybrid events, but I think that most, and what people are saying in the industry is that there's going to be in-person events, because you can't do something like a Coachella or something huge like that. People like the human connection. I'm a big hugger. Like, I miss hugging people and having that communication, where you actually get those networks. I'm a chatter, so I miss even going to the office and having the coffee talks and all of that. So I think that people miss and long for those collaborative experiences when you're face to face. So I think that will happen, but at the same time, I'm not going to stop broadcasting my events to this larger audience of Hearst people, because that has been a huge benefit and has brought the organization, I think, closer.
Absolutely. What are a few essentials you look for when hiring for your team? A question from Amy.
Good question, Amy. I look for creativity and passion. And again, events are all detail oriented. So it is how, if somebody's going to follow up, if there's a typo in the letter, if it's unclear, you know, I really look for attention to detail.
But maybe like when someone's interviewing, how do you even pick those things out, or how do you become an example of that when they're interviewing in front of you for 30 minutes? How do you show that you're creative or that you do have attention to detail?
Well, I will ask questions. You know, what are you watching? What are you absorbing in social media? What are you watching? What's the last book you read? Like how broad their vision is of the world, because we are such a large corporation. I need somebody who's going to be curious. You know, I really look for curiosity, and we have to come up with a lot of ideas. Some are going to stick and some are not, but I look for the energy and enthusiasm.
I really like this question that I received from the audience, and I'm going to combine it with a couple other questions that I got. But if you were starting your career again, what would you do different? And to kind of follow up on that, it seems like in the beginning of your career, you followed your mentors and went from job to job. Would you do that again?
Without question. Without question, I would do it. And when I was going through it and living it, it was very scary. And when I went in for an interview, I always felt like, oh my gosh, look at my resume. It looks like I've worked for 10 different people. Have to be able to explain that I've worked for 3 people. And how do you do that in a cover letter when it looks like I had jumped around? But the opposite was true, because one person brought me on to the next job, who brought me on to the next job. So it was a series that was a more a direct line than my resume reflected. So that was challenging for me. But I would do it all over again. And my mentors are still dear, dear friends of mine, and talk to them often with frequency. And also, I've also kept tabs on with almost every single with me. You know, I think that goes back to the relationships, but I try to pay it forward and mentor the people who work for me and follow their careers, whether in the PR field or the events field. I still keep in touch with them as well.
And maybe just to follow up on that, I feel like everybody's dream is to work for a mentor, work for a boss who appreciates you, and you go from job to job and have new experiences. If you don't have that and you feel like you don't have that in your workplace, should you go look for a new boss? Should you go look for a new job?
Well, look around the company. the person doesn't necessarily need to be your direct supervisor. You could look at, is there anybody else in another department that you connect with or you feel can take you on as a mentee, or even in another industry. But I going back to another question, sorry, I'm jumping around. The passion, I think that I could not do PR for an organization that I wasn't passionate about. So oftentimes when I do interview people who are looking for PR jobs, I will say to them, what do you like to do outside of work? So if I do informational interviews, which I do because I love meeting people, I'll say, do you like to run? Well, you could work for Roadrunners Club and be their PR events director, or you could work for Nike, or you could work for, like, how do you blend what you're passionate about? And this goes back to Manny Eisenberg and Bruce Payne. How do you marry what you're passionate about with what you're going to do? It's because, let's face it, we spend a lot of time at work. And if it's an industry that you love, it makes work a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question from Ted: with all the consultants and AI technology, how do PR project authenticity for their clients?
That's a very good question. And I think that there must be ways of tracking that. I just don't know the answer to that question. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that they have to track it. The publicity world has changed dramatically since I used to do PR, and I used to have to print out clip reports to send to my editors that were this thick. Now it's all social media. I was back in the day when I used to fax things to people and put it on the PR newswire. And now social media has taken over, and people put it on Instagram, and how many likes does it, it's a different world now.
Yeah, absolutely. Now then, going back to kind of skill sets, a question from Amy, like, what are a few co-curricular experiences you suggest students take advantage of at Duke if they are looking to go into events?
Well, I was social chairman of the sorority. Never did I ever think that was going to be anything that I would use in my life. But I think that getting involved, there are so many different ways to get involved on campus. And I think anything you can do in your free time will make a difference, because those, believe it or not, are skills that you can translate and use later on in your life.
And then maybe this is a great question that everybody here wants to know. What's the best method, email, LinkedIn, Telegram, etc., for Dukies to reach out to you and seek your advice?
Free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out that's probably the easiest way, and I'll get back to
Great.
Because I do answer.
That's exactly, you told us.
I don't ignore, I answer.
The publishing media world has changed so much since you started at Hearst. If someone was interested in media, do you think print is still the place to be? Can you talk about this a bit? About how the future of media should shape one's career choice of those interested in pursuing it?
I think that the brands and the magazine brands will still be around for a long, 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 long time. I mean, I think it's a different experience getting a printed magazine than reading something online. I think the value of media, and if you look at what's happened during quarantine, I think people are longing for something tangible again. And we spend so much time on our screen. It's the gift of going and escaping and reading something that is just for pure pleasure or for information. I was raised on the New York Times, and I was raised on newspapers and magazines, so around to stay. But that being said, I think the younger people who do consume so much media online and this is how they do everything on their phones. I think that when they get a magazine, it feels special to them. a different experience for them. So I think that I would encourage you to still pursue a career in media, not going anywhere.
Well, thank you so much. I bet a lot of people here have joined and just like, it's time to switch your career, go into PR, marketing, and do what you did. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everybody for joining our conversation. I know Mommy has shared Lili's LinkedIn in our chat. So again, thank you, Lili, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. It was an honor being invited to talk to you.
No, it's on our honor. So thank you.